On July 15, 2025, the night sky over Damascus erupted in explosions as Israeli warplanes launched targeted airstrikes, their targets sites linked to pro-Iranian militias. The strikes hit a suspected weapons depot near Damascus International Airport. The operation lasted only minutes, but its impact was immediate. At least 8 people were killed, and buildings were reduced to rubble. These strikes are part of a long-running shadow war between Israel and Iran, often fought on Syrian soil. For Damascus residents, the threat of sudden violence is a constant reality. Each strike risks drawing in more players and escalating the conflict. What comes next? The cycle of violence continues, with no clear end in sight. South of Damascus, the province of Suwayda is in turmoil. Home to Syria's Druze minority, Suwayda has seen weeks of protests over poor living conditions and demands for political freedom. Local Druze groups seized government checkpoints, seeking to protect their communities. The government responded with force, leading to armed clashes and casualties on both sides. This unrest exposes the Syrian government's fragile grip on power. With resources stretched thin, Damascus is vulnerable to both internal dissent and external threats. Some analysts believe the Suwayda crisis distracted Syrian forces, making the Damascus strikes more feasible for Israel. The situation highlights how local conflicts can have international consequences. Syria's economy is in ruins, fueling desperation and anger. The Druze, once neutral, now find themselves at the center of a new conflict. Their struggle for dignity is another chapter in Syria's ongoing tragedy. The unrest in Suwayda is a stark reminder. Syria's war is far from over. As the government's authority is tested, the risk of wider instability grows. The world watches, wary of what further unrest could ignite. In Suwayda, hope and fear walk side by side. The United States responded quickly to the Damascus strikes. The State Department called for calm and de-escalation, urging all sides to avoid actions that could destabilize the region. The statement reaffirmed America's support for Israel's right to self-defense, while also expressing concern for Syrian civilians. The U.S. sees Iran's presence in Syria as a threat to regional stability. Balancing support for Israel with the desire to avoid wider war, the U.S. called for restraint. Humanitarian concerns were front and center. Millions of Syrians depend on aid, and renewed violence threatens their survival. The U.S. emphasized the need for a political, not military solution to Syria's crisis. Behind the scenes, American diplomats worked to clarify events and urge restraint among regional players. The U.S. often acts as a mediator, hoping to prevent a cycle of retaliation. The main American hope that this incident won't spiral into broader conflict. The focus, they insist, must return to peace talks. The world cannot afford another war in the Middle East. The U.S. message is clear. Diplomacy must prevail. The stakes are too high for miscalculation. For now, Washington watches and waits. The next moves by regional actors will be critical. The hope is for dialogue, not destruction. The United Nations voiced deep concern after the airstrikes. Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for an immediate halt to military actions in Syria. The UN stressed the importance of respecting Syria's sovereignty and international law. Special Envoy Geir Pedersen warned that such attacks undermine peace efforts and risk a wider regional conflict. The UN's focus remains on protecting civilians and finding a political solution. The strikes in a densely populated area put countless lives at risk. The organization called for a full investigation and accountability for any violations of humanitarian law. Diplomats expressed frustration that years of negotiation are threatened by renewed violence. The UN insists there is no military solution to Syria's crisis. Only dialogue can bring lasting peace. Regional and international actors are urged to use their influence to reduce tensions. The hope is for leaders to choose diplomacy over escalation. The UN stands ready to help, but needs cooperation from all sides. The latest violence is a setback for peace, but not the end of hope. The world's eyes are on Syria, waiting for a turn toward negotiation. The stakes for civilians could not be higher. The UN's message, end the violence, start the dialogue. The future of Syria depends on it. Turkey, Syria's northern neighbor, condemned the Israeli strikes as a violation of Syrian sovereignty. The Turkish government warned that such actions threaten regional security and could trigger new waves of refugees. Turkey's own military presence in northern Syria makes any escalation a direct concern for Ankara. The strikes complicate Turkey's efforts to stabilize its border and counter Kurdish groups it sees as threats. Turkish officials called for all foreign forces to respect Syria's borders and support a political solution. Turkey backs the UN-led peace process and wants a government in Damascus that aligns with its interests. Ongoing violence, including Israeli strikes, keeps Syria unstable and undermines Ankara's goals. The condemnation also reflects Turkey's complex relationship with Israel. Diplomatic ties exist, but regional disagreements persist. By criticizing the strikes, Turkey signals solidarity with other Muslim countries and asserts its regional influence. The main hope from Ankara, a return to calm and a stable southern border. Turkey wants predictability, not chaos, on its doorstep. The situation remains tense, with Turkey watching developments closely. Any further escalation could draw Turkey deeper into the conflict. For now, Ankara urges restraint from all sides. The stakes for regional stability are high. Iran's response to the airstrikes was immediate and fierce. The Iranian Foreign Ministry condemned the strikes as barbaric aggression and accused Israel of violating international law. Iran vowed continued support for Syria, insisting its presence is at the Syrian government's request to fight terrorism. The strikes are seen as a direct challenge to Iran's regional strategy. Tehran called on the UN Security Council to condemn Israel and warned that silence encourages further attacks. Iran faces a dilemma: retaliate and risk a wider war, or hold back and appear weak. A direct military response is risky, so Iran may turn to allied militias for indirect retaliation. The main goal is to show strength without triggering uncontrollable escalation. Iran's leaders promise to help Syria rebuild its defenses. The world watches to see how Iran will respond. The stakes are high for both Tehran and the region. Iran's message aggression will not go unanswered, but the risk of a larger conflict looms. The next steps could shape the future of the Middle East. For now, Iran signals resolve and caution. The region braces for what comes next. The Gulf Arab states responded with measured concern. The UAE, having restored ties with Syria, called for restraint and respect for Syrian sovereignty. The Gulf Cooperation Council condemned the strikes, warning they undermine regional stability. Both the UAE and GCC emphasized the need for a political solution and adherence to UN resolutions. Their main worry: the Syrian conflict spilling over into the Gulf. State sovereignty is a core principle for these nations, and foreign interventions are seen as dangerous precedents. The UAE promotes economic cooperation and de-escalation, but violence in Syria threatens this vision. Gulf states must balance new ties with Israel against traditional support for Arab causes and distrust of Iran. Their statements reflect this delicate balancing act. The hope is for a calmer Middle East where diplomacy prevails. The Gulf wants to avoid being drawn into a conflict between Israel and Iran. Stability and economic growth are their priorities. The region's future depends on avoiding escalation. The Gulf's message: respect borders, pursue peace. The stakes for the entire region are clear. The European Union called for an immediate halt to violence after the Damascus strikes. The EU urged all parties, especially regional actors, to show maximum restraint and avoid escalation. A broader conflict would have devastating consequences for both the Middle East and Europe. The EU reaffirmed its support for a UN-led political process, insisting there is no military solution to Syria's crisis. Protecting civilians and upholding humanitarian law remain top priorities. The EU is a major provider of aid to Syria, and fears renewed fighting will worsen the humanitarian crisis. Norway echoed these concerns, condemning the strikes and calling for respect for Syrian sovereignty. As a neutral mediator, Norway's voice carries moral weight in urging de-escalation. Both the EU and Norway fear that open conflict between Israel and Iran would unravel years of diplomatic work. Their message: step back from the brink and return to dialogue. European leaders want diplomacy, not confrontation. The hope is for a stable, prosperous Middle East. The risk of miscalculation is too great to ignore. Europe stands ready to support peace efforts. The world cannot afford another war in Syria. The world's reaction to the Damascus airstrikes reveals deep anxiety. From Washington to Tehran, leaders agree. The situation is dangerous and could ignite a larger conflict. The international community is holding its breath, hoping this incident won't spark a new war. Two themes dominate: a call for peace and respect for Syrian sovereignty. The US, UN, EU, and Gulf states urge de-escalation and restraint. Turkey, Iran, and Arab nations condemn violations of Syria's borders. The hope is for an immediate end to attacks and a return to diplomacy. The world wants Syrians to rebuild their lives without fear of bombs. Regional powers are urged to use their influence for peace, not proxy wars. The future of the region hangs in the balance. The strikes are a stark reminder of the Middle East's fragile peace. One miscalculation could lead to catastrophe. The world's plea choose caution over conflict. The coming days will determine the path forward. Will it be more violence or a renewed search for peace?